Welcome to another episode of Coaching Outdoors. And our guest today she's got me intrigued, I have to say, and I'm going to keep it particularly vague and let her introduce ourselves, though slightly different from our normal guest, and one that Alex and I have both been very, very curious about having a conversation with. So without further ado, Ellen, it would be really amazing if you could introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, hello everybody, and particularly hello Alex and Anna Marie. It's great to be with you. Whoa, who am I? Okay, let's go straight from the shoulder. I'm a heartful, badass, solopreneur businesswoman who's helped lots of other women over the past 30 years to put the soul back in their business. So that sort of says it all for a start. And people ask me, what's the soul? Especially, well, less so now actually, but it used to be, what's a soul then? What's it got to do with my business? And it's got a lot, because the soul is the spark, the soul fire spark that set your business off in the first place. Something said, I want to do this. And when you start, it's sort of really exciting. When I'm talking with clients, I sort of say it's a little bit like, that first date and, beginning of a love affair, and it's all whoa up here and you're really going for it. And it can last quite a long time. But there's this horrible thing that happens, and it's called, everyday life, and it gets all humdrum and you sort of go plod, 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 plod. And the soul is that spark that has got hidden away and you've forgotten about it. So I find that helping people put that back, and I do help mostly women at the moment because it's women who are coming to me, and I don't go out hawking for clients, which is not a good idea, but at the moment it's women who are coming and they want it. They may not say it like that, but they want it and they want something. So I do it that way. And I was really attracted to Alex at first because I sort of saw you as an outdoor coach, a coach who works with nature. I do. And nature is such a way to get you back inside. Such a way to get you in touch with this person who's been saying, hello, I'm in here. I'd like to come out, please. And nature will help you bring that out. So that's a little bit of a start of a 10.
Oh, it's wonderful. Ellen was actually introduced to me through my mother-in-law, and Ellen and my mother-in-law share some common ground in the world of paganism and shamanism, and that really being absolutely in touch with nature and truly grounded in nature and connected with nature. So we will touch on some of that a little bit later on in the podcast as well. But Ellen, the first question we always ask all of our guests is, it's a wonderful question. It's one of those ones that really kind of gets to the nub of where your personal connection with nature comes from. And it's, what is your earliest memory of being outdoors, and why do you love the outdoors so much yourself?
Well, you asked me this just before, or a little bit earlier, like yesterday, and I thought, oh, what is it? So you're sort of like sitting there thinking, what do I remember first? And what came, it comes every now and again, I don't remember it every day, but I was sitting on, now, I better say this, sitting on a clapper bridge. Now, some people will know what a clapper bridge is, and other people will not. And they're ancient stone bridges that are built with huge, great uprights out of the river, and then enormous lumps of stone on top. And there's pieces of stone on top, for instance, can be about 10 or 12 feet long, and at least that thick, if not double that thick. So they're huge. And our ancient ancestors, the one that I'm talking about is at least 4,000 years old. put these things up, partly because they wanted to cross the river, but I think there are other reasons as well. Particularly, I'll tell you a bit more about this one if you want to later. But anyway, we used to go there. We didn't live very far away, so we used to go there, and I was about one and a half maybe, because my mum was still alive. She died when I was nearly 3, and she sat on the bridge with me, and you know how you dangle a child in the water so their feet could go, and my little feet were splashing. I can remember the splashing. I can still feel the splashing, and I can remember it was absolutely amazing. And that was really my very first memory of being out in nature. I'm sure there are others because we were always out in the garden and everything, but that one really made an impression. Yeah.
Thank you for diving into that. And it sounds really precious as well. You know, that fleeting period of time that you had on earth with your mother was so short, and to be able to have that to go back to, and it's just been just seeing you light up as you teletransport yourself back there to being 18 months old again. So thank you for sharing. And joining the dots from that young child to where you are now. And you mentioned that part of your kind of coaching backstory has involved various trainings, one of which was the transpersonal psychotherapy discipline. And it would just be interesting just to kind of add a little bit more flesh to the bones to discover a bit more about your coaching backstory, and then what specifically encouraged you to step outdoors.
Well, stepping outdoors wasn't really the problem. Stepping indoors was much more the problem. Much less so now. And you said joining all the dots, and I sort of made a woo expression. There are a hell of a lot of dots between that and now. One hell of a lot.
A few key ones.
No. I wasn't going to do all of them. You know, we don't have that time, and it would be a bit like, I don't know whether you remember Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. And I would end up being a Vogon, boring everybody to death with my poetry doing that, so we won't go there. But main ones between there, one of the main ones, my family have followed the old magic ways, the old shaman witch ways of Britain for generations. Hundreds and hundreds of years, and there are a lot of us around. We just sort of don't look like anybody, you know, don't look different from anybody else. And so I grew up with that. I grew up with the idea that yes, you can talk to trees, and yes, you know, if you want an answer, go out and sit under that tree for a few hours in the dark and see if an owl comes down and talks to you, and all this kind of thing. So this was normal. It did make life a little difficult when I first went to school because, well, Dad had told me, don't talk about Uncle Jack when you're in school. But, you know, you say that to a 5-year-old, it's a waste of time. So, of course, I did. And Uncle Jack was a woodsman. If you've read Peter Walburn's Hidden Life of Trees, he was like that. Not a gamekeeper, but he was a man who looked after woods down on Dartmoor. And he would go out, he'd take me out, and he would go out into a field, and, just in a clearing, and he could put his fist up, right up in the air, way up there, but like that. And he'd just stand there, like that, for a moment or two. And within a moment or two, a wild hawk would be down on his fist. And, you know, I grew up with that, so that was normal. Mm-hmm. So you start telling the kids at school, and it doesn't do anything for your reputation at all. It really doesn't. And so I suppose one of the big dots, there is that I had to learn very quickly to keep my head down. That there were things you don't talk about, because most people will sort of go, oh, you're making that up. Ooh, look, listen to her, she's showing off again, and all this kind of stuff that unfortunately kids do. And their parents sometimes too. So that was a big thing that I had to learn, that you could talk about all the stuff that really fascinated me with some people, but you couldn't talk about it with everybody. That has got so much better now. We were talking back in the 1950s then, and there was quite a big divide. Less than you might know, but a lot of that was hidden. So that was a big thing for me. And then, so I learned all that, and I had ponies and dogs and cats and everything, and lived with animals, adore them, still can't live without animals. And used to go out. In those days, you could go out, and I used to be allowed out, I was encouraged to go out, you know, with a tarp and a sleeping bag and a bag full of food and my pony. And see you in a couple of days, love. And I'd be on Exmore, camping. And I was, what, 11, 12? Parents don't feel they can do that anymore. But that, again, looking back, when I was doing it, of course, it was normal. It was fine. And I wasn't the only person, you know, only child who did it. We wouldn't do it together necessarily. We would go off on our own sometimes. And it was okay. But looking back, that was enormous, because I really learnt that it was safe and good and okay in nature, that it was fine. I learnt how to drink from the streams on Exmore, and how to boil the water, and how to make everything safe, how to look after my pony while I was out as well. So it was enormous. Nature was part of me. You know, it was fine. I could do this. And then after that, I went to university. I went to Exeter University first. And the degree was in modern dance and drama and art, all of which I love. And it's now done at Elen Sentier in London. And that was a big thing, because we were using the Rudolf Laban techniques of movement and dance. And they are, I don't know whether either of you know them, but they're fascinating, because he was one of the first who really got into body language. So he learned, he learned, and then he taught how you could look at people's body language. Now, it's much more than probably what most people know, because an awful lot of it is, get myself lined up here, I would be talking with my right hand and waving around and that sort of thing, but you would be actually looking at my left hand. You would be looking at the shadow movement, and how the shadow works with the outward expression, i.e. how the inward works with the outward expression, tells you so much. There's masses of things you learn through that. Fascinated me. So not only was I getting to dance, which I adored, but I was also learning, your movements are all telling you this, and you know some of this on instinct. So that was, in a sense, my first introduction to psychology and psychotherapy, because you learn to look, and you use all that in making dances, in creating dances, choreographing, and in dancing yourself. So it makes you very aware, because you're aware that you're doing some beautiful movement over here. But, you know, is this one sort of hanging there like a bunch of bananas? And you learn to be very aware through yourself. When you're aware of your own body, you're much more aware of what other people do. So that was first intro to psychotherapy. And then I went completely off-piste on that sort of way, because I couldn't dance well enough to dance on stage, which is what I wanted. So I went off and worked for the Ministry of Defence, for goodness sake. I mean, if that isn't off-piste, what is? Did all sorts of things as a policy maker with finance and with what we call human resources now. And I ended up, because I was quite fascinated, and my second husband does it, in computers. So I ended up being a software boffin. And that was fun. But I also found that, because, you know, I was leading teams some of the time, and I was using the Laban technique to actually observe my team and my bosses and say, okay, that's what's going on. Right. And I found it fascinating, again, that you could actually watch people, see them, and then adapt yourself, or as we call in the old magic stuff, shapeshift, into being something that they could see and listen to, rather than this thing that was, they weren't feeling in touch with. So that was really useful. And then I got rheumatoid arthritis and osteoporosis, and which I still have, and I was medically retired because I was just too ill to go to work every day, at least, somewhere else. And that's when I got into the psychotherapy, and I found the transpersonal through a lovely pair of original teachers here, Ian Gordon Brown and Barbara Summers. And I said, I'm training with you. You don't know anything about it. No, I don't, but I'm coming anyway. And so I trained with them through London University, and that's been the life ever since. But what they say, and with the transpersonal, certainly the way I learned it with Ian and Barbara, I kept going, that's like we say in the old ways. That's like we say in the old ways. And so I talked to them, as I say, Ian, this is like so and so and so and so. And you go, yes, that's right. Because they both had a strong spiritual side as well. They've both been, high-powered psychotherapists and industrial psychotherapists and that sort of thing as well. But yeah, they understood. Life seems to have wound me up, if you see what I mean. You're going this way. You're going to go this way with lots of side effects, but you're going this way. So was that enough dots or too many dots?
That's right, dots.
It's such a lovely thing to hear someone's backstory and to hear how they have, like you said, all those dots, but has been leading to something, and they all seem to be connected, and they all have an underlying story and an underlying theme. And even when you ended up in the Ministry of Defence, you were still using a Labra technique, and there's all the connecting pieces there. And I just love the sort of the start of your backstory with you being in nature as a child. And that's one of the reasons why we asked the question at the start about what's your earliest memory of being in nature, because what we've found with most of our guests, if not all of our guests, is they've got something about their childhood that's really connected them, whether it's through family connection, spending time with grandparents or parents outdoors, or whether it's through animals. There's that connection as a child, and yours just, I think, is even stronger than most people, spending time out in nature on your own, wild camping when you were a child. It's gone even that step further, and bringing in that the old ways into it, which we will talk about later. Really starting that at a very young age is really insightful as well. And it just goes to show that there are so many different ways of connecting with nature, and so many different avenues in. Just bringing it now to what the work that you're working on at the moment. So at the very start of the podcast, you mentioned this idea of soulful connection, and this being a badass, and bringing that soul back into people's, helping people bring that back into their business. So can you just give us some examples of how you and nature together have helped your clients with that soulful reconnection and bringing the soul back into business?
I've just got a new client. She's a lovely woman, middle-aged, runs her own business, but she's also a project manager for a big firm. So she's doing two jobs, and she's finding that's actually really quite hard work, because she's getting time boundaries and space boundaries. People are encroaching and trying to run over her and all this kind of thing in both her own business and in the big business. And so we had our first meeting and first session, and I used the phrase, my dad brought it to me ages ago. I used to, bored child, and well, what makes your heart sing, girl, then? And I've never forgotten it, and I use it with clients, and usually there comes a stage where they nearly always sort of end up like the grumpy child me, and you say, okay, well, all that aside, what really makes your heart sing? If everything else was, what would you really do? if you really could. And like you said at the beginning, what's your memory? Have you got a memory of that makes your heart sing? And they so often, and I mean, we're having this conversation on Zoom. We're not even out in nature yet. And we're having our first session on Zoom. And so, you know, so we'll just sit there and just feel into it for a minute. And they nearly always come up with some kind of natural image. It may include other people, but the likelihood of it including some part of nature, water, rivers, sea, beach, cliffs, rock pools, mountains, woods, whatever, it nearly always does. In fact, I'm actually trying to think of when it didn't, and I can't think of one at the moment. But it seems to do this. So everybody has this. And like I said, you know, about your soul bits, that memory has got lost, as though it's sort of been told, you're only allowed to do that when we go on holiday or on Sunday afternoons after lunch. And then you get them to pull it back. And that's very often the first thread that they're going to take to wherever it is they're going to sort out what brought them to me in the first place. So I find that happens for everybody. And I agree with you so much. It's often child or young person. And, you know, it's like the fairy story things, long ago and far away. And they're thinking of it still in that long ago and far away. And you say, well, actually, it could be now. You know, how's about if we bring it now? And this particular client has actually gone off and done it. She's got somewhere close that she could go and repeat something like her memory. So I said, well, go and do it then. And so she does. And I find that a lot. I don't know whether you find that as well with people. As whether, you know, they do often have an early memory and it's the thing that makes them sing is outside, being outside somehow.
And it's there, and it's hidden.
Yeah.
And it's not until you give it space and time to emerge, and then it's a realization that it has always been there in some way, and it's just giving it the opportunity to emerge.
I find that we do that an awful lot. I don't know whether you both do too, but unfortunately with modern society, people seem to need to have some figure giving them permission. And I find that I hate being an authority figure. Probably the way I have to do it, because, you know, you often have to do what you really dislike in some ways. But I'm a nice, kind authority figure. That's part of being a badass. It's nice being nice, wild, and kind. And I give them permission. And do you both find that you like give permission in a sense, just by being there, just by saying, well, let's brew a cup of birch leaf tea or something, and it's like, oh, all right then, and you've opened it up. Do you find that?
And it's almost the system within which we are a part of and perpetuate by living and contribute to is so hierarchical.
Yeah.
And everything has almost been taken from us. And when you look at whether it's the education system, the medical system, the pharmaceutical industry, the politicians,
no,
we're not going to go there.
No, we're not. No, definitely
we're not going to go there. And it's giving yourself permission to believe and to truly accept your own authority.
Yes.
And this is where I want to kind of segue in, and I'm particularly intrigued by this idea of wild woman retreats, and partly I've had a number of friends who have been embracing the wild,
Yeah.
And actually the word in itself can conjure up so much, which
It
when we
does.
look at culture and societally,
Yeah.
people can be frightened of, scared of, like a woman in her power, like a wild woman. And what that represents is huge. So yes, would love to hear a little bit more about your retreats and then how kind of nature plays a part, though ultimately I don't think it couldn't play a part.
It's the retreats are about. I have them here at my house. I live on the edge of the Long Mynd in Shropshire, and it's very beautiful. It was a caldera, a volcano, all volcanoes. So we've got lots of little pointy hills. Well, little, they're quite big actually, and lots of long, like dragon back walks on the tops of hills. So you can walk for a long way, and you're just looking out, and you can look 10 miles, maybe more. And people don't get that view, especially if you're a town, live in a town, you get sort of, 30, 40, 50 feet across the road to the next house. And that is enormous. It makes an enormous difference because suddenly you can see the world out there. So part of them coming here is to actually go out. Like you said, Anna Marie, they can be scared of the wild. And I've taken people up, and there's places we can go around here where you can't hear any other human noise. There's only us. And so I have about 6 to 8 women per retreat. So we're not a big gang. And we go out, and several of them is like, I can't hear anything except the trickle of the stream and the wind. And at first there's, the hunching shoulders, there's a bit of the back got tense, and they're almost talking like, they're not quite talking like that, but it's almost like that. And you say, it's okay, let's go and sit by the stream then, And you don't even have to sort of say, well, how about put your hand in it? You just sit somebody by a stream, and they start messing with it. And they start playing with stones, and they actually look at plants, and that tension goes out. And so the retreats are an awful lot about getting out there and not needing to be afraid. But we also do crazy things. We had a really good one last year. The first one we could do after COVID, and we went to this stream and area, and there'd been cattle going through. It was a crossing place and a drinking place, so there was a lot of mud. And needless to say, somebody fell over. Somebody slipped. They were fine. They actually got brave enough to swear a lot about it, which was amazing because we all laughed like mad. And so that started it, and we ended up with all these women rolling in mud. And they hadn't done that since some of them had never done it, and so others hadn't done it since they were kids. We were filthy, absolutely disgusting. So it was like queuing up for the showers, and well, let's do it together. We'll rub each other's, rub the mud off each other's hair together, and so I am structured in the retreats, but I'm also like quite open for if it turns up that somebody falls over in the mud and then everybody decides we're going to have mud baths, then that's what we're going to do. That's fine. It's not a problem. And when I was a kid, I used to roll down hills, and we've got a couple of places we can do that. So and I can still just about do it. I look even funnier now than I used to. And so that sort of sets people off there. Oh, she's doing it, I'll do it. And we roll down hills. There's an old quarry just around the corner from us. It's all beautifully overgrown, and hawthorn trees and grass and reeds, and there's a little pool at the bottom. And just go and sit there. And I don't do mindfulness, but one of the practices from my childhood, from the old ways, is what we call stillness. And it's just a case of being still, definitely having your eyes open, not shut, so that you're aware of the bird that just landed in that tree. You're aware of the way the leaves are blowing. And you watch the rushes and the reeds and you see that, oh my goodness, you know, there's a little mouse ran across there. So it's just really letting nature in. And there's lots of opportunities for that. And I've got a good way of sharing. So we go out on the Saturdays, so Saturdays, a lot of it's spent out. And usually, unless it's absolutely horizontal rain and force 9 gales, we go out. Because I know places that you can go, or we can go and hide in things. And we can go and drink the rain, you know. I'm sure you've done that. And then we come home, and I have like sort of A1, A0, those big pads of paper that you used to hang up on things. So I got those, and everybody has a sheet or two. There's a great big box of old crayons. And now draw what happened for you today. Don't write it. Draw it. No, we're not looking at, you know, Academy Awards for art or something. Just draw it. And they draw it as a journey because they remember it, and so they draw it round as a journey. And then in the evening after supper, we share the journeys. And people, you know, put their drawing down, and nobody touches your drawing except you, and you take us on this journey. And what comes out from that is enormous, and people share. And again, you've got the permission thing, because all these women have been, you know, drinking rain and doing mud baths with you all day, and you all support each other. And support doesn't happen a lot in the everyday world, nothing like it should do. So they start to learn that support is there, and all you need to do is to reach to the other person, and these are ways of reaching. So does that give you some sort of idea of that, these crazy wild women having mud baths and climbing trees? I've got pictures of people on retreat, and they're up a tree. And they haven't done that since they were a kid. You say, okay, well, I'm gonna photograph this then, you know, we can't lose that. But we had one on Exmore several years ago, about 17, 18. And there's a big hill on Dunkery Beacon. We always sort of go up to it, and it's got an enormous stone cairn. The stones are held together with concrete, and it's sort of like about 15 feet high. And they all climbed it. So I've got this picture of them all going, hey, on the top of this cairn. And again, you know, when they first start, they're sort of a little bit being polite, a little bit being sort of distanced. And certainly by the end of Saturday, they're not. And by the end of Sunday, they're definitely not. So it's an opportunity, really. And they all come with their own ideas, their own intention of why they're here, so we share those. And then, you know, come the end of it, well, how's it gone? You know, you said this at the beginning, how's it now? And it won't be just me asking that, it'll be the others asking that. So they're doing it themselves. It's not me telling them all the time. And I love it. I think it's great fun. So.
It sounds absolutely just amazing. It's one of those kind of experiences I'd love to do, and there's so much richness in there in terms of the images you've shared and the examples, and it just everything from, you know, the individuals at the start through to being a group at the end. You know, you've called them a gang.
Yeah,
it's one of those, the word, even the words you use describe that transition that people go through, and you know, being nervous of nature at the start and then rolling in mud or drinking the rain, or, you know, there's so many ways in which we're giving ourselves permission to be just like we were as a child. You know, children don't need to be given permission. They will jump in the puddles, they will roll in the mud. They're normally told to stop.
yes.
And that, I think, is the problem with our you know, our culture. You know, children are allowed to play around until a certain age, and then all of a sudden they have to grow up and stop running around in muddy puddles or throwing themselves in mud. And why, you know, why as adults do we have to re-permission ourselves to be able to do that in the way that children do just naturally. And and one of the things I think that really struck me as well is this idea of the way you've worded it. So wild women's retreat. So it could be a women's retreat that's in the wild, or it could be a retreat of wild women. And I just love that, you know, the play on words, and the you read it as it makes sense to you. So I read it as women are wild and they're in a retreat, but it could be women's retreats in the wild. So there's you know, there's so many ways of connecting with that. And you know, I think it's a great opportunity, and I would say to anybody, you know, Ellen will share her details later on in the podcast, but you know, go on her website and have a look. There's some great imagery on there as well, but go on the website and have a look at these retreats, because it does look like something that would be just so much fun, and it's such a learning experience as well, and such a transitionary experience. Which transitions us into talking about more about the wild ways and the old ways, sorry, and the British traditional the native traditions. So we've had podcasts where we've talked to people about native traditions from other in areas, you know, South America and Australia, New Zealand, etc. So it'd be really great to just get a little hint and a little idea about how you bring the British traditional ways, so the paganism, the shamanism, the old ways, into your coaching, and how your clients benefit from your wonderful background in these traditional ways.
Well, most people's idea of shamanism comes from what's called core shamanism, which was an American anthropologist traipsing around the world with notebook or tape recorder or whatever, and collecting ideas and thoughts and things from various peoples around, and then sort of like bringing they, you know, what do they all do? And a lot of it became, I think this is a big thing, a lot of it became, what do they all do? And I was lucky way back in 1966 to meet with some Native American people. I went to stay with friends for 3 months, and this was not a sort of setup. It was not, you know, like we're all going to a powwow or something like that. Literally met them, wasn't expecting it, met them out on a walk on the wild. And it was about what you feel, what you be inside, not about what you do. I went out, I got a girlfriend, pen friend, daughter of an American family that my father knew, and we'd gone out, they'd taken us out towards Colorado, ended up in Colorado, and we went out from the place we were staying early morning, and there was, it was like on a plateau, and then there was this gorge, cliff thing, and we went to sit there because that was where the sun would come up and we wanted to see. So we were sitting there, and these 3 native people came on horses, and we were both horse mad, so it was like, oh wow. And but we were decent, you know, and normal and not sort of starey. And they came and sat beside us, and we weren't scared or anything. And one of them sort of said to me, sort of sitting there, you watch sun? Yeah. Watch sun come up? Yes, please. And you know Earth? Yeah. Yeah, we know Earth. Yeah. Good. And then we just sat there, and we didn't do or say any more. But we could feel that, you know how you feel somebody coming to you with their energy? And we were doing it back, and we connected. And it wasn't about practices or how we buried our dead or how we did our drumming or anything like that. It was the fact that we connected to Mother Earth and Father Sun. And I think the basis of all old ways all around the world is about that connection between the planet we live on, because we can't live without it, and the sun, which enables the planet to come alive. Because without the sun, it would just be a lump of grey rock whizzing round. And so you've got the both of them together. So one of the bases of ours is this connection between earth and sun, and the connection through you, that you can feel the sun come down on you, and we all feel the warmth of the sun and the light of the sun, and you can feel the earth holding you up, and the two meeting through you. So everything runs around that. So we're completely good with nature, as you said earlier with your mum, and we understand, as far as possible, nature. We work with her, and we are not the most important species on planet Earth. For us, there have been humans on planet Earth for about 5 million years. Earth herself has been going for about 4.5 billion. So she actually was doing quite a lot, quite well, long before we turned up. And so most old traditions talk about their elders. So our elders are not old humans or ancestral humans. They may be as well, but Father Oak is our ancestor. And in Britain, it's the oak because we have a lot of oaks. We're very good at growing oaks here. In the Nordic traditions, it's the ash because they're very good at growing ash trees there, and etc. around the world. And so we've got Father Oak, who's an elder. And we've got the hair girl, the hair woman, who comes, and I'm sure both of you and probably quite a lot of our listeners have actually seen her hair. And sometimes, you know, especially in the spring, they will sit up, and they're just sitting up there looking. And sometimes they will look at you. And so we have the hair girl, and she can tell us something. You know, you've got Mother River, who flows through. One of our little traditions, it's big, but it sounds little. You've got something you want to lose, you want to let go of. You really, you know, like a bad job, a bad relationship, or something like that. Find yourself a river, stand in the middle of it, or stand on a bridge, and look downstream, and just feel yourself saying, you know, thank you very much, job, you were great, it was fine, but not anymore, I need to let you go. And give it to the river to flow away from you. And you'll feel like that was enough, that's done. Turn round and look upstream, and you feel the river coming towards you, and you say, okay, I'm open for the next thing, and I don't need to know what it is, but I'm open to it. So our ways are about those kind of connections, and about the fact that we work with our gut instinct, our feelings, and our intuition, as well as our blooming heads. And everybody works with their heads now, and you know, guts are just for animals, feelings are all wishy-washy, and intuition's woo-woo, isn't it? Again, the old traditions say, no, you work with all of them. And I use that now as part of the teaching that training, teaching, coaching that I give people. Is sort of saying, well, you know, how about you talk to your gut for a change? And oh yeah, one thing. For instance, I was brought up in Devon. I was born on Dartmoor, grew up on Exmore. Now, the way we did things on Dartmoor when I was a little child was actually a bit different to the way they did things on Exmore. My mum comes from Yorkshire. The way they do things in Yorkshire was different to Dartmoor and Exmore. My dad comes from Lancashire. Ditto. I now live in Shropshire, and I've only lived here 3 years, but you get to know people. And they've got slightly different ways of doing things than any of the other places. So that's really about living with the spirit of place where you are. You know, Exmoor likes it this way. Exmoor's old red sandstone, if you want to get into it geologically, and that's important because that's Mother Earth's bones there. Dartmoor's granite and volcanic. So it's different bones. Shropshire's volcanic but different again. Feel into the spirit of place where you live, which I'm sure you both do, and it will tell you what it wants. and how to work with it there. So one of the things is like we say hello, we greet the land where we are. You know, I'm a stranger here. I've not been here before. I'll try not to do anything to tread on you, but can you help me? Can you show me? Can you show me lovely places to go? Can you show me nice fruit on the trees and all this sort of thing? So there's very much this connection across. So it's all about connecting with nature the whole time. And not feeling that, you know, you're a human being who lives on planet Earth. You're a human who lives in planet Earth and with planet Earth. So our old ways are very much about that.
There has been nuggets that have transported me around the globe and back again in my memory, from watching sunrises and sunsets in numerous countries, and then just grounding and being by a centuries-old oak tree that is near where I live, in Somerset, and everything in between. And I'm sure you have transported our listeners as well. And this insight into the old ways, it's a part of us, it's our heritage. And sadly, we have become divorced, disassociated from it so much. And it's almost like it's beginning to gain a little bit more traction. Like there's little kind of just little glimmers of light that you know, in the work that you do, the work that we do, the work that our guests do, it's all about that reconnection.
Yes.
And having conversations with clients, there is an awareness that, you know, they are trapped in their heads. Yes. And actually the challenge, the problems that emerge because of that. And actually then how can you drop down into your heart, drop down into your gut? And it's a different way of being. And again, it kind of can be a little bit scary if it's not what you've been doing. Yeah. And just would love to send an invitation to you. I mean, we've had some amazing examples and our listeners love examples. So if there's any more examples of working with clients to really paint another picture or two, that would be really interesting to hear.
Well, I can give you one that another client has done recently, and she, it started from her being in the idea that she really loved, that made her heart sing, and this was again out in nature. And so many clients have problems with boundaries, you know, the general space-time boundaries, people boundaries, all of this kind of thing. And hers was, and she was getting run over by the senior, she leads a team, and she was getting run over by her bosses and by some of her colleagues who were leading other teams. So, well, you know, you ought to be teaching your team, you know, getting your team to do it like this sort of thing, and, you know, always park on the left or whatever. And sorry, me being facetious. And so she's come to me, and I liked what she said when we started off, when we did our first 15-minute chat. And she said, I don't know what I'm looking for, but what I want is a grown-up human being that I can talk to and bounce ideas off, and who'll bounce them back off me. And I thought, I love that. That is what I do. That is what I like doing. And she wasn't sticking labels on it. She was just saying, this is what I need. And so often we do need that. So there she was. So we were talking about her boundaries and that sort of thing. And I said to another one, probably this is getting to be a habit of me, so like take a day off and go out in the woods. And she's got some lovely ancient woods fairly close to her and her dog. So I said, well, go on, sandwich in your pocket, bottle of water for the dog, flask of tea for you, go out in the woods. So she did, and she was wandering about for about 5 hours in these woods, which is something she hadn't done for ages. And like the freedom of it, and you know, you just sort of walk up this path and then you find a log and you sit on it, and you're still sitting there an hour later. And she was doing all this sort of stuff. So she found a log, I think it was, in a clearing, and she sat down and she had a bit of a cry about her, people just pushing at her and shoving at her the whole time, and her not being able to say no properly. And she got a hare, a real hare, lolloped into the clearing and sat and looked at her. And she said, I actually caught eyes with it. I felt the hare caught my eyes, and I was just looking. I don't know how long we sat there, but it felt like forever. And as I sat looking at the hare's eyes, I just felt, you know how everything gets in here? And she said, it just moved. And suddenly I could feel all the way out to the edge of the clearing. And I didn't feel pressured, and I didn't feel my worries were there. I just felt it had moved. And she loved it and came home. And the following week she went into work, and the usual idiots came around and, like, oh, well, you should do this, do that, and push, well, you'll do this job for me, won't you, because I'm too busy, and all the stuff that happens. And suddenly she said the hare was back, and it was like I was there, and I couldn't see the hare, but I could feel, like seeing your mind's eye, the hare there. And so I just said no to this person, and they went, and she said everything just moved back, and there was like this wall around me, and his sound was bouncing off the wall, and I was just sitting there going, and with no expression, all over face. And after a little bit, probably only a minute or two, she heard the person say, oh, well, all right then, I'm sure you're probably right anyway, okay, you do it your way, and went off. And she said it was like, I could do it. And she said, I'm gonna go and say good morning and thank you to Hare every day, because Hare saved me there. Hare brought me back. So that is actually using the old way. She's not into this particularly or anything at all, and I certainly didn't talk about it like this with her. But she said, I've got Hare. Hare's my friend now. And made my day.
I just love that example, because there's so many things in there. It reminded me a lot of, we've had a previous guest who talked about vision questing, and it also reminds me that, when we're coaching people, it's not necessarily just about the time we spend together, but it's also about the time when we're not together, and giving them the ideas, giving them suggestions, so that the self-coaching carries on. So giving them that, permission, take yourself off into the woods, have an experience, and let's talk about it when we come back together. And whatever happens in that experience, there's so many learning opportunities. And as you said, this lady might not herself have been connected with the old ways, but they connected with her, and they came to her, and the Hare came to her. And we've also had a number of examples from previous guests where an animal has made an appearance in either a coaching session or to somebody, and that is the memory they then carry forward. So when they're having that challenging situation again, they have that flashback to the hare, or to the horse, or to the sheep, or to the robin, or whatever the animal might be. And that is their sort of, it's almost like they just needed that visual memory to say, no, I don't need to do it this way, I can do it a different way. And your examples of just throughout the whole of the podcast today, your examples have been absolutely wonderful and so varied and so ranging as well. And just to start wrapping this up now, because we've talked about so many wonderful aspects of your coaching practice, and I know your experience is vast, and we could talk for hours. So I'm fairly sure we'll have you back on as a guest again in the future to sort of go into some of the areas we haven't been able to talk about today. But just before we really start to finish off and wrap up for today, are there any resources, maybe it's books or podcasts or audio or anything that you could suggest to our listeners and our watchers who might be more interested in finding out more about the old ways, but also about you know, how you have got to outdoor coaching and to connecting and working with nature. So any resources or any suggestions you can make to our guests?
Well, sounding like I'm blowing my own trumpet, do read my books. And funnily enough, do read the novels, because you'll learn a lot from the novels, because they are all about people who are living in the everyday world, but also living with other world, living in the old ways as well, and how they learn and how they change and the problems that they have and that sort of thing. So I put a lot of that into the novels, and I'm just polishing the third one for my editor for January, so goodness knows when it's going to come out, but you know, we're working on it. And also read my books, whichever ones, like, pick you know, whichever ones fall on your head and out of the shelf or something. And people, yeah, I've got a friend I work with here, about 2 miles away. She's a horse whisperer and a workshop facilitator, Kim McMuldrow, lovely lady, and she works very similarly to me. And for her, she works with, it's not horse therapy, it's, you will go and meet her horses, they're all rescues, and you meet them and you have to you have to learn how to behave with them. And so, you know, people will go along and there's Alfie, and so they'll, oh, hello Alfie, and they'll put a hand out and Alfie goes, oh! And so, you know, despite what Kim will have told them in the first place, and then just, no, keep still, just stand there and feel your heart open and say hello from your heart. And as they learn to do this, and she runs, I think it's about 6 session courses, like weekends, where you go and play with the horses with her. And the horses gradually, they will come and they will show you, and they will show you, like, that was not the place to touch me, that was not how to do it. And you learn how to, like, ask them. And I've watched it, I've helped her with a bit of it and watched it. People really connect. I mean, we've even had people there who are afraid of horses and who are then not afraid of horses. So I recommend her. I'll give you her details later. And somebody, yeah, he's worldwide, a man called James French, and he runs a thing called the trust technique. I don't know whether you know it, but just put James French or trust technique in Google and you'll get it. And watch some of his videos. Again, he works very similarly to me. He's a Reiki master and has used mindfulness, but he's taken it a lot further. And it, you know, when I first met him and saw him, I was like, you're doing what I, you know, you're doing what I do. And we're doing what my Uncle Jack did, what my dad did, and everything else, sort of thing. And he teaches you to connect. Now you connect again with an animal. You can do it just as well with a tree, and you connect with your inside. So I would like hunt out people like that. There are quite a lot of people around, but find one that makes your heart sing. Because, you know, there are masses of us around, but we don't all necessarily turn you on. And that's absolutely fine too. But look for people who are very honest, vulnerable, open, people who will really talk to you, that you feel you can look into their eyes and you see them, and that you feel comfortable with. And ask your questions, you know, like the wonderful lady said to me, you know, I need a grown-up human being I can bounce ideas off. Try and find them. And I know some. You can look at my links and everything like that on Facebook and website and such like places, but delve into it for yourself. As part of this is, like you said, and this is badass, You need your own authority. You know, you've been listening to Ellen, it's fine, wonderful, that sort of thing. Right, now then, let's go and find something that turns me on and go that way.
Thank you. And sometimes designing that knowledge journey of what really makes your heart sing, instead of, oh, I'll do another degree, or I'll do another master's, or I'll do another training. And it's almost, that's us being kind of spoon fed.
Yeah.
It's actually bring it back to yourself.
Yes.
And I sometimes find some programs and courses I've done, just, you know, shorter weekend or 5-day courses, it's almost I've been quite challenged by the concept. And I think sometimes just approaching that head on, heart on, gut on, can really, really be transformational. Because if there's a resistance there, then it's a signpost to something. But thank you for sharing those resources. I will definitely be dipping into them. I was on a program last weekend, a Celtic medicine wheel in a yurt in Somerset, which again is taking it back to the source material of the Celts, our kind of ancestors, and seeing what emerged from there. So again, there is so much there. Get out, have conversations with people, connect ultimately. Yes. But Ellen, thank you so much. It has been an absolutely delightful journey spending time with you, and thank you for your generosity and insight, sharing examples. You know, I for one will definitely be taking you know, the hare story away with me, and they are such graceful, beautiful, strong and powerful creatures that when you do encounter one, you're incredibly lucky, however fleeting that contact is. So thank you. And to our listeners, check out the resources Ellen had suggested. And if you have not come across our other episodes, check them out as well.
Get on there and have a listen, definitely.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much in advance for your support.